Here is a puzzle, and I want you to chew on it before I give you a single answer. Picture a man, 60 years old. He walks into a room fine. He shakes your hand, firm grip, clear eyes, no cane, no limp, tells a good joke. By every ordinary measure, he is a healthy fellow. Now I ask him to do one small thing. Sit down on the floor, that is all. But there is a rule. No hands. Don't grab a chair. Don't press on your knee. Don't lean on the wall. Just lower yourself to the floor. And when you get there, stand back up again. Same rule. No hands. Nothing to push against but your own two legs, and whatever widths your body still has about balance. I am going to score it. 10 points possible. 5 for going down, 5 for coming up. Every time a hand comes down to help, I take away a point. Every time a knee drops to catch you, another point gone. If you wobble, if you tip and have to steady yourself, I shave off half a point for the unsteadiness. That is the whole examination. No needle, no blood drawn, no machine that goes ping, no cold stethoscope on the chest. A man sits down on the floor and stands back up, and I write down a number between 0 and 10. A doctor down in Brazil built this test. A physician of sport and exercise, a fellow named Arahu. And he did not build it to check whether you can touch your toes or fold yourself into some pretzel on a yoga mat. He built it because that little number, that score out of 10, taken on the ordinary floor of an ordinary examining room, turned out to predict something that nobody would guess just sitting here listening to me. It predicts, with a kind of rude honesty, something about how many years the man has left. Now I am not going to hand you that number yet. I am going to make you wait. Because the number is worthless, it is just digits. Until you understand why the floor of all the places on this earth is where the human body stops being able to tell you a lie. Your face can lie. You can put on a good color, a good posture, a brave voice. Your body, lowering itself down to the ground and hauling itself back up against the pull of the whole planet, cannot lie. And I want to know why. That is the mystery. Let's go work on it together, like a couple of detectives who have been handed a strange clue and told figure out what it means. So the first thing a detective does is look hard at the evidence in front of him and refuse to accept the easy story. And there is an easy story here, sitting right on the surface, practically begging you to believe it. The easy story says, oh, this is a flexibility test. Old people get stiff. They can't fold up their legs, can't get down comfortably, so of course they score low. And stiff people, well, they're old. And old people die sooner. Case closed. Let's all go home. But that is a lousy explanation, and I'll tell you why it bothers me. Flexibility, being able to bend and fold, that is a real thing, sure. But watch what this test actually demands. It is not asking you to hold a graceful pose. It is asking you to control your entire body weight through space, down and back up, without falling over and without cheating with your arms. That is not a stretching problem. That, my friends, is a physics problem. It is a problem of torque and leverage and balance and raw pushing power all tangled together and happening in real time while gravity does its level best to dump you on the ground. Let me make you feel the physics of it, because once you feel it, you can never unfeel it. When you stand up from the floor, think about what your body actually is. It is a stack of segments, feet, shins, thighs, trunk, head, all hinged together at the joints, and every one of those hinges is a lever. To rise, your muscles have to generate a turning force, a torque at the knee and the hip, big enough to swing that whole loaded stack up and over your own feet. And here is the cruel part. When you are folded down near the floor, your body is in the worst possible mechanical position to do it. Your center of mass, the single balance point where all your weight effectively pins itself, is way down low, and it is sitting out ahead of your feet, out over nothing. Your muscles are stretched long, working at a rotten angle, at the exact moment you are demanding the most from them. An engineer would look at that arrangement and wince. It is like trying to lift a heavy door by pushing on it right next to the hinge. You have given yourself the shortest, weakest lever at the moment you need the longest, strongest one. So to pass this test cleanly, With no hands, you need three things all at once, and they have to cooperate. You need enough strength to make that torque against a bad lever. You need enough control, moment to moment, to keep that traveling center of mass balanced over your feet so you don't topple. And you need a frame, a skeleton, solid enough to take the loads without something giving way. The doctor down in Brazil put it plainly. A person who can sit down and rise from the floor using just one hand, or better yet, no hands at all, is not merely limber. That person sits in the top quarter of what he called musculoskeletal fitness, and, he said, their odds of survival are probably better. Strength, balance, and bone, measured all at once by the simplest thing in the world. Now that is a rich claim, and a detective does not swallow a rich claim whole. He takes it apart. Three things bundled together, he says. All right, let me pull them apart one at a time and interrogate each one, and see which of them is the real culprit, and see whether any of them turns out to be a red herring leading me astray. Because that is how you solve a thing like this. You don't stare at the whole mystery and hope. You break it into suspects and you sweat each one. So here is suspect number one. Strength. And strength hides a secret that fooled people for a long time. A secret I find genuinely surprising. So let me set it up carefully. If you had asked me, or most anybody, what happens to muscles as a person ages, I'd have said, well, they shrink. You get thinner in the arms and the legs, the muscle wastes away a little, and the strength goes with it, hand, in step, the way two friends walk down the road together. That is the sensible picture. It is also wrong, and the way it is wrong is the first real clue in our case. Because when the scientists actually followed people for years and measured both things separately, the amount of muscle and the strength of the muscle, they found the two do not walk in step at all. The strength runs off far faster than the muscle disappears. In one careful study that tracked men over 5 years, the men lost about 16% of the strength in the muscle that straightens the knee, the very muscle that shoves you up off the floor. 16% of the push gone in 5 years. And in those same men, over those same 5 years, how much of the actual muscle bulk in the thigh vanished? About 5%. Only 5. Sit with that gap, because it is peculiar. The buck barely budged. The power collapsed 3 times faster. The muscle is still mostly there, filling out the trouser leg, looking for all the world like it should do its job. But the wallop it can deliver has quietly drained away behind the scenes. It is like walking up to a truck that looks perfectly fine, big engine under the hood, and turning the key and finding it can barely climb a hill. The size fooled you. The size is not the thing. The thing is the force it can actually put out, and that is leaking away on a much faster clock. And the clock only speeds up. Follow people out toward the age of 75, and the strength is draining off at something like 3 to 4% every single year in men, and roughly 2.5 to 3% a year in women. Every year. Meanwhile, the raw muscle mass over that same stretch is slipping away at under 1% a year. So the gap is not closing, it is yawning wider. The scientists gave these two things two different names, because they finally understood they are two different beasts. Losing the muscle bulk, they call that one thing. Losing the strength, the power, that is another thing entirely, with its own name and its own faster, meaner timetable. And it is that second one, the loss of power, that reaches up from the floor and grabs you when you try to stand. The floor is asking the truck to climb the hill, and the floor does not care how big the engine looks. So that is one clue, and it is a good one. But it cannot be the whole story, because I know plenty of strong people who still get into trouble on the way down and on the way up. Strength alone does not save them. So let us go looking for a second suspect, and this one is sneakier because you cannot see it at all. You can weigh a muscle. You can measure how hard it pushes. But how do you weigh the thing that tells the muscle when to push, and how much and in which direction, all in a fraction of a second? That is the job of the nervous system, and it is doing a staggering amount of arithmetic every time you move. Think about what is really happening when you lower yourself to the floor. Your body is a tall, wobbly stack of bones balanced on 2 small feet, and somewhere up around your belly there is a point, an average of all your weight, that the engineers call the center of mass. When you stand still, that point sits comfortably over your feet, and staying up is easy. But the moment you start to fall down toward the floor, that point goes on a journey. It swings forward, it drops, it slides out past the edge of your feet, and for a good part of the trip, your body is not balanced at all. It is falling in a controlled way, and your muscles are catching that fall inch by inch. To do that, your brain needs to know right now, this instant, where that center of mass is and how fast it is moving. Not where it was a moment ago, where it is now. And how does the brain know? It has two beautiful instruments for the job. Deep in your inner ear there is a set of tiny fluid-filled loops and little stones that sense every tilt and every acceleration of your head. That is the vestibular system, your built-in level and accelerometer. And scattered all through your muscles and joints and the soles of your feet are millions of little sensors that report on stretch and pressure and angle. That is proprioception, the sense that lets you touch your nose with your eyes closed. Together they pour a river of information into the brain, and the brain uses it to command the muscles a heartbeat ahead of trouble. Now here is the sad part, the part the simulations show us. As the years pile on, those instruments get noisy and they get slow. The little stones in the ear thin out. The sensors in the joints report less faithfully. The signals take a hair longer to arrive and to be acted upon. So the brain is now steering the body with data that is a touch out of date. Imagine driving a car and the picture through the windshield always shows you where the road was half a second ago. You would still drive, but you would drive nervously. You would grip the wheel harder. You would jerk and overcorrect. That is exactly what an aging nervous system does, and we can measure it. When the feedback about the center of mass comes in late, the body stops trusting any single muscle to do a smooth job. Instead, it braces. It fires the muscle that bends the knee and the muscle that straightens it at the same time, clamping the joint stiff, because a stiff joint is at least predictable. Scientists call that co-contraction, and it is the body's confession that it no longer trusts its own timing. It is like a beginner on ice, rigid, arms out, everything locked, burning enormous energy just to not fall. A young nervous system flows down to the floor like water finding its level. An old one negotiates every inch, stiff and expensive, and a half second behind. So now you see two suspects standing together. The engine has lost its power, and the driver is working from a delayed picture of the road. And still, I promise you, that is not the whole story. Because there is a third suspect, and this one does not affect how you get down or how you get up at all. This one only matters for what happens if the first two fail. This one is about the frame of the machine itself, the skeleton. We like to think of bone as a dead, permanent scaffold, something you build once and keep forever. It is nothing of the kind. Bone is alive. It is a busy city that is constantly tearing down old material and laying down new. A demolition crew and a construction crew working side by side your whole life. When you are young, the builders keep ahead of the wreckers and the bone gets denser and stronger. Somewhere in midlife, the two crews come even. And then, past a certain point, the wreckers start to win. For women, that point can arrive with brutal speed. In the 5 to 7 years right after menopause, a woman can lose as much as 1/5 of her bone density. 1/5 gone from the very scaffolding that is supposed to hold her up. Men feel smug about this for a while because it happens to them slower and later. But by the age of 65 or 70, the men have caught up to the same sad pace, and the loss at the hip in particular starts to accelerate for everyone. The frame is quietly getting thinner and more brittle year after year, and nothing on the outside tells you it is happening. You feel exactly the same. And the numbers on this are not small. Roughly 1 in every 2 women over 50 and 1 in every 4 men will break a bone because of this thinning before they are done. And here is the cruel twist, the compound interest of it. Once you have broken one bone this way, your risk of breaking the next one is about doubled. The first crack is not just an injury. It is a prediction. So now lay out the 3 suspects on the table together and look at them. The power to push up off the floor is draining away faster than the muscle itself. The nervous system that has to steer the body down and up is running on a delayed, jittery signal, bracing instead of flowing. and the skeleton that would have to survive any mistake is growing thinner and more likely to shatter. 3 separate breakdowns in 3 separate systems on 3 separate timetables. And here is the thing that ought to make the hair stand up on your neck. The simple act of getting down to the floor and standing back up tests all 3 of them at once. It asks the engine for its power. It asks the nervous system for its timing and balance. And it puts you down in the one place, low and off-center, where a failure would land hardest on that fragile frame. One little movement, and it interrogates every suspect in the room simultaneously. Which is why, when a Brazilian doctor decided to actually follow people and count, what he found was so much sharper than anyone had any right to expect from something so humble as sitting on the floor. Let me give you the numbers now, because you have earned them. He took just over 2,000 adults, ordinary people between 51 and 80 years old, and he had each of them do the sit and rise, and he scored them out of 10. Then he did the only thing that really settles an argument in this business. He waited. He followed them for a median of more than 6 years, and he wrote down who was still alive and who was not. And when he lined up the scores against the outcomes, the pattern was not subtle. It was a staircase. For every single extra point a person could earn on that little test out of 10, their risk of dying over those years dropped by about 21%. 1 point. 21%. Think about what that means. The difference between needing a hand and a knee to get up and getting up clean was not a matter of looking a little more graceful. It was a measurable slice of your survival. And when he took the people at the bottom, the ones who scored a 3 or below, the ones who had to fight and lean and haul themselves up off the floor, and compared them to the people at the top who rose with a single hand or no hands at all, the ones at the bottom were something like 5 to 6 times more likely to be dead by the end of the study. Now, when a result is that dramatic, a careful person gets suspicious. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe 2,000 people and 6 years was not enough. So years later, they went back and did it again, bigger and longer. This time more than 4,000 adults, and they followed them not for 6 years, but for over 12. And the staircase did not soften. It got steeper. Among the people who scored at the very bottom, in the 0 to 4 range, more than 42% of them had died. Among the people who scored a perfect 10, sitting down and standing up with nothing but their own 2 legs, the number who had died was 3.7%. 42 against under 4. From the same simple movement on the same living room floor. And they were smart about it. You might say, well, of course, the low scorers died more, they were probably older or heavier or already sick. So the researchers scrubbed the numbers clean. They adjusted for age. They adjusted for whether you were a man or a woman, for body weight, for a history of heart trouble, for diabetes. And after all of that scrubbing, the people at the bottom still carried nearly 4 times the risk of dying from natural causes, and about 6 times the risk of dying specifically from their heart, compared with the people at the top. The floor test was not just a stand-in for being old or being sick. It was seeing something real, something that all the usual measurements had missed. So now you can feel the whole shape of the thing, and it is a little bit frightening. Let me tell you what that floor is quietly measuring, because it is not really measuring how gracefully you sit. It is measuring whether, one ordinary afternoon, you are going to go down and not get back up. Here is the ugly arithmetic. Every year in this country, about 14 million older people fall. That is 1 out of every 4 people past 65. Not once in a lifetime. Once a year. Roughly 37% of those falls do real damage, something that needs a doctor or takes away a piece of your independence, and that comes to something like 9 million injuries a year. 9 million. And once you fall the first time, something changes. Your odds of falling again roughly double. The first fall is not just a fall. It is a message from your body that the margin is gone. And the falls kill. In the year 2021, falling took the lives of about 38,000 Americans past 65 and sent around 3 million of them to the emergency room. 2 years later, in 2023, the emergency rooms were seeing 3.85 million fall injuries, and more than 1 million of those people were sick enough to be admitted to a hospital bed. The death rate that year was about 70 people out of every 100,000. And for the very oldest, the people past 85, that rate has roughly doubled over 20 years. The more recent counting puts the yearly deaths above 43,000. Every one of those numbers is a person who at some point could not control their own center of mass on the way down. Now watch what happens when the floor wins. An older person falls, and the weak spot in the skeleton, the hip, snaps. And here is the part nobody tells you when you are young and your bones are thick as oak. A broken hip in an old body is not a broken bone the way a kid breaks an arm. In the year after that fracture, somewhere between 15 and 25 out of every 100 of those people are dead. And of the ones who will die, about a third of them die inside the first month. Think about that. You lower your center of mass to the tile floor of your own kitchen badly, one time, and the odds that follow you look like the odds of a serious disease. The fall did not just hurt the hip, it pulled a thread and the whole garment came apart. And it is expensive in a way that tells you how common it is. Back in 2015, treating these fall injuries cost this country about $50 billion a year. By 2020, it was around $80 billion. The people who count these things expect it to pass $101 billion before the year 2030. A country does not spend $100 billion on a rare accident. It spends it on something that is happening everywhere, all the time, to people who did not see it coming. So now go back and stand next to me at the beginning, watching a stranger sit down on the floor and get up. And ask again, what is the doctor really seeing? Because now you know it is not one thing. It is three things at once, braided together, and the floor reads all three in a single motion, the way a good instrument reads temperature and pressure and volume with one needle. It reads the muscle, the raw power to push your own weight up against gravity, the very power that fades 2 to 5 times faster than the meat on your bones, so that the strength drains out of you while the mirror still tells you that you look fine. It reads the nervous system, the balance computer that has started reporting where your body is a half a beat too late, so that you have to brace and stiffen and wobble your way through a movement your grandchildren do without a single thought. And it reads the skeleton underneath, the scaffolding that has been quietly thinning in some women by a fifth of its density in just a handful of years, so that the very structure meant to survive a fall has turned to something closer to chalk. Flexibility, strength, balance, the wiring of the brain, the density of the bone. One movement. And you cannot cheat it. You cannot tell the floor that you used to be an athlete. You cannot tell it about your good intentions. It does not care what the scale says or what your blood pressure was this morning. You go down and you come up, and the floor gives you a number, and that number has been sitting there in the data of thousands of human lives, quietly agreeing with itself, study after study in Brazil, over 6 years, over 12 years, across 4,000 people. Every single point on that little scale of 10 was worth about a fifth off your risk of dying. Not off your risk of falling, off your risk of dying, from anything. The man who invented it said it plainly, and I will give it to you the way he meant it. A person who can sit down and get back up off the floor using just one hand, or better still using no hands at all, is not only in the top quarter of physical fitness. Their chances of living are probably better too. He was careful. He said probably. He did not promise you anything. But the numbers behind that careful little word are some of the loudest numbers I have ever seen come out of something so humble as sitting on the ground. And I want to leave you with the thing that actually keeps me up, because it is the good news hiding inside the bad. The floor is honest, but it is not cruel. It is not a fortune teller reading a fate carved in stone. Every one of those three things it measures, you can push back on. The muscle answers to use. The balance answers to practice. Even the bone, the slowest and stubbornest of the three, responds to a body that keeps loading it, keeps asking something of it. The test is not a sentence. It is a mirror held up early while there is still time to change what it shows. Because that is the real trick nature has played on us here. She did not hide the warning in your blood work where you would need a laboratory to find it. She did not bury it in your genes where you could do nothing about it. She wrote it on the floor of every room you have ever lived in a language your own two legs already speak. The doctor watching the stranger sit down is not doing magic. He is just reading a message that was always there, in plain sight, that the rest of us walk over 100 times a day without ever looking down. We spend fortunes looking for the secret of a long life in pills and potions and machines that go ping. And it turns out one honest piece of it was under our feet the whole time. Patient, silent, keeping score. So the next time you find yourself down on the ground playing with a child or reaching for something that rolled away and you go to stand back up, pay attention to how you do it. Notice what you reach for. Notice whether you reach for anything at all. The floor has been asking you a question your entire life. It only starts keeping the answer after 65. And the honest thing, the beautiful and terrible thing, is that it has been telling you the truth all along, and it will go right on telling the truth, whether or not you ever decide to listen.